Welcome to Sports Econ 101. This is the show where we discuss sports topics from a business perspective. I'm your host, Edward Brown, along with my co-host, Bruce McGowan, longtime sports radio personality. Today's show is going to be fun because we are going to welcome back Steve Baker, who's a sports agent. He was with us, months ago.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun, so we're going to have him on in the second segment here. And let's see, also at each commercial break, we're going to ask a sports trivia question where we're giving away vacations to the first 3 emails with the correct answer. Now, the vacations are not sponsored by the radio station, but by Lighthouse Resort and Marina. And the vacations are free. Their only request is a $75 cleaning fee to cover the housekeeping expenses. Check them out at lighthouseresortandmarina.com. You know, it's the summertime. The weather's getting really good.
Oh, it's getting too hot.
Yeah,
It is. We have 95 degrees here in central Marin County, in north of San Francisco, which is inordinately hot for this time of the year. But hey, it's getting hot everywhere.
Yeah, my car registered 100 degrees.
Well, open your windows. Jeez.
What did I think about that? Good thing I wasn't on my motorcycle.
Fresh air is good for you, Edward. Fresh air.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
So let's see here. Trivia theme today is going to be baseball incidents they'd rather forget.
Oh, I like that.
That going to be fun?
Kind of, the guy that makes the big mistake at the wrong time in the game.
Exactly. And I don't think I've got Fred Merkel on here.
No, that's going back a long way.
Yeah, but that's an easy one, though.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, for some people.
For us baseball aficionados.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, this segment of Sports Econ 101 is sponsored by Pacific Private Money, providing mortgage investments that are currently yielding, get this, over 8%. In fact, they just sent out their newsletter, 8.15%.
Sweet.
Conservative market. And it doesn't get any more conservative than that. Check them out at pacificprivatemoney.com. And let's see, when Steve comes, talks with us, so we're going to talk a little bit about the Warriors franchise and also a little bit about social media and how that all kind of fits in. So stay tuned. You're listening to Sports Econ 101. Don't touch that dial because we will be right back with our guest, Steve Baker, sports agent. I'm going to stretch it out there a couple more seconds.
I was writing down the 8.15%. Shit.
Yeah.
Where's that?
It's the LTV is only about 52%. It's all Bay Area mortgages.
Oh,
I told you about that.
I didn't absorb it until you just said it just now.
Mm. Right. So what you been up to, man? Just busy?
Moderately busy. Not
It's
insane.
kind of nice.
Have
like
you been
that.
down with the Niners much?
No, I only work part-time, so most of my work is just going to the station and filling in it, and I've been going to all the Warrior games, which has been so much fun.
Except for the last one.
Well, they just couldn't shoot the ball well, and Cleveland played terrific defense. But I think it was a case where everybody was not shooting, and then they didn't get into their fast break. They couldn't set up. They didn't move the ball around. They didn't space the floor. It was pretty simple.
Yeah.
They just got.
I don't know why Curry didn't drive to the basket.
Do you think there's any chance that Curry's hurt?
Well, a lot of people are saying that. It's possible. I think he just had a bad night. I think he was due for a bad night, and I think some pretty good defense by Matthew Dellavedova.
Under Armour went up 4.8% the day after Game 1.
I'm right. Yeah, they said something about $1 billion worth.
That's that stuff that protects your.
No, Under Armour's the shoes.
The shoes he wears. Okay.
I mean, I invested in Under Armour about a month ago.
Smart man.
I thought it had the Curry effect. Actually, talk about social media. There's a whole thing about the Curry bump.
Okay, well, let's get right into this. Okay, ready?
Mm-hmm.
Welcome back to Sports Econ 101 again.
That's easy for you to say.
Sometimes. Edward Brown here, along with Bruce McGowan. Bruce, why don't you reintroduce our guest from months ago?
Yeah, this is a fellow that I think anybody who knows about today's sports world knows that athletes have to have agents, guys that speak for them, the guys that work out their contracts, that work out endorsement deals. And Steve Baker is one of the best around. He's been here in the Bay Area for a long time, has a lot of clients. And Steve, I know that. Let's talk first of all about your connections with sports. Going back, before we get into specifics about what's going on today. You've been doing this for how long? How many years?
Since 1986.
Wow, so that's 29, almost 30 years. And who have you worked with mostly?
Well, when I first started out in '86, I worked for 5 years with Lee Steinberg.
Oh, sweet.
Back before the Jerry Maguire movie.
Yeah.
So my first deals were deals like Troy Aikman, Jeff George, people like that.
Wow.
And you are an attorney by
I am an attorney. Went to Cornell Law School, and then after I went on my own, probably my first big client was Ken Harvey, former Cal star, who was a first rounder. Did a deal for him with the Cardinals that made him the highest paid linebacker in NFL history, and again with the Redskins. more recently, I represented Jeff Garcia with the 49ers, and among my more recent clients are Shane Scoe, the All-American, who now plays with the 49ers.
You know, I can imagine that, you know, some players may be thinking, you know, why do I need an agent? I can just, you know, speak for myself. And then I'm thinking, and here's an attorney, right? And there's an old adage that he who acts as his own client he who acts as his own attorney has a fool for a client. I bet inside you kind of think that and want to tell somebody.
I would hope there's some value added. But, hey, listen, the key to being a good agent is having a good client. There's no question about that. Somehow I was a lot smarter representing Jeff Garcia out of San Jose State with the 49ers and Jeff Bridewell with the 49ers years earlier.
Yeah. What do you do when you get some of these guys who are just like head cases?
No, Jeff Bridewell was a wonderful player.
I don't mean him personally. I know because I don't even know, but I'm talking about just in general when you're dealing with somebody who's got a lot of talent, but you go, oh my gosh, this guy's a train wreck.
Well, luckily, the players I tend to represent tend to be from places like Cal, Stanford, and Davis, so I'm not getting a lot of head cases. So I think there's a certain self-selection that I tend to go after pretty bright players. So
that's a good point. You know, compared to going to some of these other schools that you have no idea where.
I was talking to a friend of mine who's a corporate sports marketing executive last week, and I was very flattered because we went to lunch and he said he was talking to a friend of his about getting into the business, and he was citing the way that I approached it with the kind of players that I tended to represent. So it was nice to hear.
And then, you know, there's obviously, you know, everyone's heard Lee Steinberg, especially because of the Jerry Maguire movie. But, you know, how does one tend, you know, I'm just kind of guessing that, you know, the more successful you get with the bigger people, it just tends to
there's no question. I mean, it's success in most things in life, but particularly as a sports agent, I think are based on two things. One is skills. I mean, being able to show someone that you're unique and being able to really help someone both on and off the field. And the other is relationships, and you build relationships by doing well by other people. Back in the days when I represented Jeff, it was very nice to be in the parking lot after a 49er game where a friend of his would walk over and say, I'd like you to represent me also. So,
oh, yeah. Do you still talk to Jeff once in a
I
while?
do.
Oh, can he still refer business in a meaningful way?
He probably more so now because he's now a coach. He just took a job as a coach with the Rams.
Okay.
And again, working with Jeff, it wasn't as much him referring business as people knew that what I'd done for him.
Yeah.
I mean, at the time, he was the first quarterback ever to make $20 million. So I mean, that was a pedigree that was nice in terms of the next player.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I'm curious. You know, when you broke into this business, you were probably not much older than most of your clients, and now you're old enough to probably be their dads, or their dad, I should say, not
or very young father.
Yeah, very young father. So how do you? I mean, athletes haven't changed in terms of the way that they prepare for games, or you know, the way they focus and the way that they get ready for the big moment, but they have changed in terms of all the other things that go on, Twitter, the social media, some of the things that are happening off the field. So how do you make that adaptation to the 21st century?
I've actually often referred to my business as very picture of Dorian Gray-like. You know, the movie where the guy doesn't age in the picture, and I'm basically in the situation where I'm getting older, and every year my clients are the same age.
Okay, well, at least it's not Benjamin Button, right?
Benjamin Button would be worse. Although looking like Brad Pitt for 20 years
wouldn't be too long.
You have to stay current. I mean, I remember watching clients tweeting while watching games and seeing how they do that. So then I made sure I got on Twitter, and frankly, I now watch a Warrior game, and while I don't tweet during it, I'm constantly following what other people are tweeting. I mean, I noticed in Memphis Game 4, I was thinking, yeah, the Warriors are playing Memphis, but it looks like the refs are calling this very nicely for the Warriors. And I went on Twitter and checked out refs, and there were 100 different tweets about, did you catch that foul that wasn't called?
It's almost like a talk show is going on during the game, or almost a semi-play-by-play. That's the way I look at it. I was talking to a guy from one of the sports stations the other day, Steve, and he was saying, it drives him crazy because he can't watch the game enough because he's constantly, being absorbed by this screen, which has 40 or 50 people responding. And so he's looking up occasionally to see the replay or whatever. And I said, how do you keep up with the game? He goes, well, you have to multitask. Well, I can't do that. I gotta focus on the game.
It's interesting and it's funny. It's like chicken and egg. I mean, it's almost like if Twitter had come first, and then you had networks that organized material with anchors that succinctly told you how things were done. You could almost see that happening after Twitter rather than before.
Oh yeah. But I'm trying to think the same thing. It's like if I'm watching the game, I don't know how I could look at my phone, or even if I could do it without looking.
There's
at
a
it.
simple solution to this. Yeah, that too. There's a simple solution. Just implant 8 eyes in your head and be an 8-eyed spider. You know?
I'll be honest, it is a
Seriously.
fascinating experience. I
Yeah.
mean, again, for example, during Memphis Game 4, I noticed that Charles Barkley's collar was not, the collar stay wasn't there. I wonder if anyone else has noticed that. During the break, I go on Twitter and see there was 100 tweets about
Jeez.
Charles Barkley's
Are
collar.
you
And by the next commercial, the collar was fixed.
So
I
someone
mean,
said, "Hey, by the way."
It's very interesting.
It is interesting. My main problem with Twitter, though, is there's so much superfluous nonsense on there.
No, without question.
Yeah.
And you need, that's again why I think the networks are great. I mean,
Yeah.
you want very bright people that are going through material
Yeah.
and editing it for you.
A lot of times I'll look at emails and like on Yahoo Sports, and a lot of times the article itself is not that great, but some of the comments are actually very good, and a lot of times they'll kind of make comments about how stupid the writer was himself.
Well, you know what it's like, not to interrupt you, but I was thinking when I did all these talk shows for years and years, 90%, well, I shouldn't say that, 40% of the people were pretty bright, the other 60% you got rid of quickly, but those 40% made the show move, and same thing is true with Twitter.
Well,
There is some,
entertainment.
it's funny, the movie Draft Day, which is in no way like the way it really is, but one scene in it that I loved is I remember Kevin Costner calling up the kid that he knew he was going to pick with the first pick and saying, get off Twitter, that it's not helping you. The GMs watch this and they're evaluating you. And it's interesting because people fall in love with the sound of their voice.
I'm sorry, for some reason that reminded me that, this is not sports related, but, you said Draft Day was not like the movie. You guys see The Wolf of Wall Street?
Oh, yeah.
That actually is very accurate, except for maybe, the throwing of dwarfs and stuff like that. But other than that, because I used to deal with a lot of municipal bond brokers, not stockbrokers, but bond brokers. And it was amazing. I looked at that and said, oh my gosh, they must have a camera back 30 years ago when I was dealing with some of these guys.
Well, they research these things pretty well, yeah.
There were a lot of elements of Draft Day which did catch the essence, but you're not going to trade the 7th pick for the first pick, then fall back to the 7th pick and get all your picks back, along with a punt return.
Yeah, well,
that isn't going to happen.
No, they got to make it a little sensational.
Maybe dating Jennifer Garner is not going to help them either. But I mean,
that's right. And by the way, when we get back, I do want to ask you about firing clients or not accepting them. See how that works. Okay, here's our first commercial break trivia question. Again, the theme is baseball incidents they'd rather forget. July 16, 1990, Steve Psycho Lyons.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Chicago White Sox utility man cements his place in history.
Remember this
He
well?
drops down a bunt, hustles down the line to first, and slides head first into the bag. Question is, what happened next?
Remember that very well.
Remember that?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's we're wondering what incident happened next on that. Okay, the first 3 emails with the correct answer win a free 3-day 2-night stay at the Lighthouse Resort. Email Edward at sportsecon101.com the answer to this question. In July 16, 1990, Steve Lyons, Psycho as they used to name him, Chicago White Sox utility man, cements his place in history, drops down a bunt, hustles down the line to first, slides head first into the bag. What happened next? Stay with us. You're listening to Sports Econ 101. We'll be right back.
Okay. And you know what happened? He got dirt down his uniform pants, so he dropped his pants.
I figured it was.
Yeah, and then the camera was on him. He realized, oh my God! And he pulls it back up. And it's interesting too because he's worked as a TV sportscaster for some time. So yeah, he's a good guy.
That's cool.
Worked in LA for a long time. I'm not sure if he's still working down there or not. He's a good guy. Very bright.
Except for that one incident.
Well,
I can't get out to anybody. You got to get it down.
It easily happened to me.
Yeah. Done some stupid things on the air, believe me. God. I've been in Herb Cain twice. It was both for just really ridiculous questions I asked.
Well, at least you didn't
One
ask.
was to Frank Robinson. I said, well, Frank Robinson, general manager of the Washington Nationals. Tell us a little bit about your job. Well, I'm the general manager.
Well, at least you didn't ask what would you, if you were a tree, what would your
It all began on a 10,000 watt radio station.
Actually, with me, it was a 5,000 watt in Auburn. That was my first job. Seriously. Middays and news and high school play-by-play back in 1975.
I envy you to be at those radio
It's so much fun.
Imagine. There's nothing. There's nothing in sports I've ever remembered like this.
Yeah.
And it's like I've been tempted to go. Do I want to go to the game? But I tell you, part of me just loves being in. I got a little home movie theater type thing. So it's like, I could pause the game, go to the bathroom, get a drink, just kind of relax.
I would only want to go to the game if I got good seats. If
Yeah.
it wasn't good seats, then I'd rather watch it on television.
And we don't. And believe me, the media seats are not bad, but they're halfway up in the crowd. They're behind the stands, but behind the basket. But
But
you know,
still
still
something
fun.
about going.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's fine.
yeah, yeah.
And maybe a World Series game I'll go to, though.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
here we go.
fun.
Here we go. Welcome back to Sports Econ 101. Again, I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with Bruce McGowan. When we cut to the first commercial break, we asked this trivia question about baseball incidences that they'd rather forget. July 16th, 1990, Steve Lyons, Chicago White Sox utility man, cements his place in history. Drops down a bunt, hustles down the line first, slides head first into the bag. What happened next?
Well, he got some dirt when he slid into first base down his uniform pants, so he loosened his belt and dropped his pants, literally right there. And everybody got a good shot of his rear end. And then, before he had a chance to think about it, and then he pulled him back up quickly, and of course that became the story of the night. Interesting little background on Steve Lyons. He became a very fine sportscaster on television in Los Angeles, working for the networks and doing some Dodger work. And I'm not sure where he is now, if he's still working, but good guy. Ran him a lot at Giant
Well,
games.
good thing he was wearing his boxer shorts at the time.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we've got Steve Baker, who's a sports agent, in the studio with us, not on the phone. He's here live in person. I want to ask you a question about actually both, about looking at potential clients who get referred to you and deciding, no, I don't want you, or B, having a client and then deciding, you know what, I got to fire this guy.
I've never had a client where I've said I've got to fire this guy.
Okay.
I've never had that. Looking at a client, I'm basically looking for two things: character and quality of player. And let's face it. I mean, the biggest issue is you want to represent players that you believe have a future to play. So the better the player, the more excited you are to represent them.
Now, in the beginning, though, when you're first starting out, do you pretty much take anybody because it's going to be?
I had the advantage that I had worked
that's
at one
right.
of the biggest firms, so I think I frankly got something lucky. I mean, I did take almost anyone. What happened was my first client after I went off on my own was a player who had virtually no chance to make it in the league, but who I helped get into the World Football League, which doesn't exist any longer. And he appreciated what I did so much that he ended up referring me to Ken Harvey, who was my first big client.
There you go.
So,
yeah, see, you never know. You
yeah.
never know. I've had that before in business where, you just treat everybody with respect, and you never know. Somebody who has no money sometimes just happens to be friends with somebody who's got a lot of money.
I can tell you that in my entire career since '86, there's never been a time ever in my life that a client has called me where they didn't get their issue dealt with that day, if not that hour.
I got to ask you about Jeff Garcia, though, because he had a remarkable career coming out of nowhere, local guy, and the 49ers had a nice little renaissance under him, and he wasn't a big, imposing physical specimen. My God, that guy had heart. And also just a decent person. Good guy. Tell us a little bit about Jeff, something we might not know about Jeff Garcia.
Oh, very, very good guy. Tremendous athlete. Great mind for football, which I think is beginning to be shown by that. I think he has a real future as a coach. I think as you see with the number of players in sports, players who come from families of athletes, where their father was a coach, they tend to grow up with that kind of mentality. And I think Jeff brought that son of a coach mentality to the field, and that helped make him, bring him his excellence. But it's interesting. You talk about luck or bad luck. I mean, absent the 49ers signing Lawrence Phillips, who's now serving 25 to life, missing a block, Steve Young doesn't get the concussion, and Jeff Garcia maybe never plays.
Yeah.
It's what happened was the 49ers, Jeff was the backup that year. His first game in was not a great game, but then he got a few more games to play, and a year later he was a Pro Bowl. It's interesting that the quarterback position is probably the most poorly evaluated by anyone in the NFL draft, because it's the position that you least can quantify someone based on raw athletic skill. I mean, so much of it's more based on mental acuity. And the very things that led to Jeff not getting drafted high, him being short of stature, were overcome by great instincts and great maneuverability.
One thing that it really is fun to watch when you see a guy like him to turn his career around is the fans just automatically sort of glom onto him. He becomes almost like, we love the underdog in this country, and we were talking about this off air just a minute ago. Speaking of underdogs, we've got two underdogs in the NBA Finals. Cleveland, which was not supposed to be here after all the injuries, and the Warriors, who were maybe a year or two away from going to the finals. And now here they are playing this incredible series, and it's just, to me, it's mesmerizing. I don't know how much you enjoyed the series.
I find this series to be one of the most fascinating sporting events I've ever seen.
Well, and it doesn't hurt to have 2 overtimes.
But on one side you have Cleveland with, without question, the greatest basketball player of our era. There's no player, frankly, there might not be a player in NBA history who could have taken the teams he's had the last 5 years to the NBA Finals.
That's a good point, because Michael Jordan had Scottie Pippen.
Now, I'm not saying that LeBron is Michael, because he's not.
No, I understand.
But what LeBron James has accomplished by taking the teams he's had.
That's good.
Now, I do think one very underrated. Everyone talks about how wonderful it was that he went back to Cleveland. The Cleveland team he went home to is much better than the Miami team he left. Kyrie Irving's a heck of a lot better than Dwayne Wade. So I think that's a story that's really been underreported. The Warriors, on the other sense, I think the Warriors are the singularly best job of franchise turnaround that I've ever seen. Usually when you see a franchise turnaround as quickly as they have, it's because they have the luck of having the first pick in the draft in a year where it's a millennial player, be it a Tim Duncan or a LeBron James. What the Warriors have done through a series of incredibly adroit moves, beginning with drafting Curry, trading for Bogut, keeping Klay Thompson, firing Mark Jackson, assembling the bench they've assembled, and hiring Kerr. I mean, you're talking about a series of every one of those moves were not obvious. And those moves together have turned them into one of the most fascinating teams I've ever seen.
And I can tell you this, it is, I'm just going to say, I can tell you from firsthand experience, because I had to cover all of those bad teams very closely. And, the Chris Cohan era was just repulsive. I mean, it was just an endless merry-go-round of coaches and players. And, you never had a sense for what this franchise is all about. And through it all, we had 14,000 fans showing up every night, which is a testament to how much basketball is,
I actually had lunch with Skip Bayless on Saturday, because we've been good friends for a long time, and I told him, after the Warriors win, you've got to play the tape of Joe Lacob getting booed 4 years ago.
Oh yeah,
for the Bogut trade. Yeah. Because talk about a complete resurrection.
Well, he got booed, and he got booed for firing Mark Jackson. We were all booing him for that one, because he didn't have Steve Kerr right there. Steve Kerr, luckily, fell into his lap.
Are you a big Bogut fan?
I'm a huge Bogut fan.
Really? He drives me bananas. I got so much critical nature. I gotta say.
Well, we expect too much out of him.
Nice human being.
Yeah.
But
I so disagree.
You expect too much from
I
this
think
guy.
Bogut is a tremendous defensive player. Yeah. I think the Warriors' defense caught up to Bogut by the end of the year. In the beginning of the year, the key, I think, to the Warriors being as successful as they were was having Bogut anchoring the middle. I mean, obviously the most important players are Klay and Steph, but I think that the team evolved into a great defensive team over the course of the year. But I love the way Bogut passes. I love his fire. I love his defense, and I love the fact that even though they tried to trade him a few years ago, he didn't hold it against the organization, and came hard to play.
I appreciate.
A real characteristic of a number of the area teams, particularly the Giants and the Warriors, is that the core players are such marvelous human beings.
Well, look at Iguodala. He was a starter and an all-star, and then he comes and now he's coming off the bench, and apparently he just embraces the role. Maybe it's because this is the first chance he's got to actually win a title.
Winning is a wonderful deal.
And again, I'm going back to 1975, my rookie year as a media person. I got to cover that 74-75 team, and the similarities between the Warriors of 74 and 75 and this year's team are startling. Going from the bench to the superstar Rick Barry versus Steph Curry, to guys that just got along together and did things off the court together as a family. That is very rare in basketball.
There's nothing like watching Steph Curry play basketball. It's like watching.
It's like watching ballet.
It's like watching. That was the line. It's like watching a dance.
Yeah.
He's so elegant, but he's so tough. I read in the paper yesterday that he's the second strongest player on the Warriors.
Really?
Evidently there's only one player on the Warriors who could lift more than Steph.
That's weird, because you don't want a guy to lift too much when he's in that position. I just look at these guys getting a little bit too muscle bound.
Well, basketball players in general, unless you're a power forward or a center, you shouldn't be doing a lot of lifting.
No,
you really shouldn't be.
Too easy to get hurt. No. That's interesting to know that, though.
No.
He's. I think, and all the commentators say this too, just for the catch and shoot. I don't think there's anybody in history.
Not really.
And Jim Barnett, he's been on the show a few times, and he's
Well,
commentating.
there are little
on
things.
games.
I mean, here's a guy who shoots 3 points, can get his own shot, shoots at a 44% rate, which is effectively shooting twos at 66%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I mean, the effect of this kind of weapon, he's incredible.
And the other night when he had a tough night, he hit only like 3 shots in the whole game or 4 or whatever it was. And granted, he was getting some tough defense from Matthew Dellavedova and some other guys. But I think it happens to even the best ones. Once in a while, you're going to have a bad game. I mean,
Sure.
Tiger Woods in his prime was not hitting every shot.
I still remember, Tim Hardaway was an awesome 3-point player, just a player in general, right? He went 0 for 17 in
Yeah.
one game.
Yeah, it happens.
It happens.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're human.
But no, definitely the defense though was phenomenal. Dellavedova was just.
Well, they slowed the game
I
down.
think Dellavedova's defense has been a little bit overrated. I think he played a good game.
but
He played a good game.
really
He played a good game.
But you got to remember, he came out of nowhere too. I mean, in the sense that he was thrown into the fray, and for a guy, his first game as a starter in the NBA Finals, to come
He played a heck of a game.
But they didn't triple. I mean, it's one thing if it's like he's getting triple teamed, and then you say, "Oh, he looked at a great job he did on defense."
combination of.
I think it was
Yeah.
more Steph missed his shot.
I think so too.
I mean,
That was part of it.
I'm wondering if Steph falling on his elbow in the previous series affected him even more. I mean, I'm not taking away from the game. I thought Dellavedova had a wonderful game.
And for Clay to come back from the concussion, ear bleeding inside, and
Yeah.
that's nasty stuff.
You mentioned it, Curry. Curry was getting some open looks.
Curry missed some open shots.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
tell you what, here we're going to go to our second commercial break again. The theme is baseball incidences they'd rather forget. Willie Stargell was a Hall of Famer. Some of the longest home runs in all history originated from his bat. He was also known as an all-around nice guy. Willie was not much of a base runner, especially in his later days. Late in his career, he tried to steal second base, realized he was going to be out by 30 feet, and tried something original. What did he do? All right, stay with us. Sports Econ 101 will be right back.
That's what I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either, but I do remember that Howard Cosell drove me crazy.
Wow.
The last World Series he was in, kept calling him the Presence.
Yeah, the thing about Howard Cosell is he did not know anything about baseball. He knew football.
All he said was the Presence.
Yeah.
And it was like, kill me now.
It was crazy.
Do you have any water here?
In the we have
It's not here. I won't get it. Don't worry about it.
Okay, because we do have a little.
I love doing this. I can do
Yeah,
this
it's
all
fun.
the time.
Yeah. Well, doing those talk shows over the years, it was not what I wanted to be doing. I really wanted to do play-by-play, but I knew if I wanted to do play-by-play, I was not going to get the job here in the Bay Area because they're very tough to get. So I'd have to live somewhere else, and I grew up here in the Bay Area, so I wanted to live here. So I made that sacrifice. You know.
Me, I'd love to do play-by-play for baseball. I could. I would
But
not
if
do
you
well
do
for-
play-by-play for baseball, it has to be a lifestyle. You have to go to spring training, and you have to go to 162 games, plus the spring training, plus all of the. It's 9 months.
Well, I'm not going to take.
And it's 6 days. No, it's 7 days a week. Seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, I covered 150 baseball games a year for the better part of 20 years.
It's a funny play-by-play.
Yeah.
One thing I realized, because when you do the radio is 10 seconds ahead of television.
Yeah, it drives me
I'll
crazy.
go to.
It used not to be that way.
I'll go someplace and I'll be listening to the radio and I'll turn to someone and say,
Yeah.
LeBron's about to get blocked.
Yeah, I hate that. That's one thing I hate about the satellite nowadays.
Well, especially when you hear it
Yeah.
the live, and then you go. Man,
And I'm an old radio guy. I love the radio even today.
All right, here we go. Well, welcome back to Sports Econ 101. Having so much fun here. Edward Brown, along with Bruce McGowan and our guest, Steve Baker. When we get to the second commercial break, we asked this trivia question about baseball incidences they'd rather forget. Willie Stargell was a Hall of Famer. Some of his of the longest home runs in all of history originated from his bat. He was also known as an all-around nice guy, but he was not much of a base runner, especially in his later days. Late in his career, he tried to steal second base, realized he was going to be out by 30 feet, and tried something original. What did he do?
Oh, he either stopped or went back to first.
Close. He stopped short and called timeout.
Ah, I love it.
Timeout!
I used to back in the mid '80s. I used to date a woman who was going out with Willie Stargell, believe it or not, whenever he used to come to town, and she said he was just a wonderful guy, and he fostered an atmosphere with that team. They called it Weir family. I think there were 19 guys in that team. They were either Hispanic or African American, and it was just that '79 Pirates team. That was a special team.
Dave Parker.
Yeah.
Except go back to watch the tape and listen to Howard Cosell calling him the Presence 25 times.
Oh yeah. Howard Cosell was not a baseball guy. Good football guy, not baseball. And boxing.
And boxing, yeah, that's what he was
Yeah.
going for.
Yeah.
What else do you guys want to cover here?
Well, I'd love to ask Steve. We were talking a little bit about Twitter and how the social media has changed things and the message, getting the message out today. Do you sit down with your clients, Steve, and tell them, we would like to craft a certain message, or do you kind of get a sense for what they are all about and sort of figure, okay, this is what we're going to go, this is the direction we're going to go in? I mean, how does that work?
I talk individually with the clients, and,
Uh-huh.
and one thing I say from the beginning is that when you're talking to the press or when you say things public, always consider not how you're feeling as you're saying it, but whether you're going to want to see that later on.
Yeah.
I do think there needs to be a strategy. In the case of my client Shane Scove, I mean, Shane grew up in Guadalajara, and I believe as his NFL career evolves, he has a real potential to market himself in Mexico and with Hispanics. So he very consciously tweets in Spanish frequently. So
Interesting story about Shane Scove. I worked with Stanford football in 2010 and worked closely with Jim Harbaugh and got to know Shane Scove a little bit. And, he had that linebacker's mentality. And here's a guy, I mean, you talk about the classic warrior. And he had some injury problems, and I thought, oh boy, his career is not going to go anywhere. But he may be one of those guys that starts to really hit his stride when he's 24, 25, 26, because he's had a couple years to kind of recoup.
Shane is special. Shane has one of the best football minds of any player I've ever met.
Stanford guy, of course.
Stanford guy. He loves football. He's the prototypical mentality of an inside linebacker. Unfortunately, he suffered a very bad injury in college, and after recovering from that very bad injury, he suffered a hamstring when he was preparing for the draft last year.
How often do you have to deal with families?
Well, I have to. Again, and I'm not just saying this because I'm talking publicly, but I tend to represent very bright people. So the families, not only is it important, I enjoy it. A classic example, I mean, Shane's father is one of the brightest football minds I know.
Oh, good.
And I enjoy that a lot. So.
And I was going to ask you, in fact, I was going to ask you before, did you leave Lee Steinberg's office like on good terms, or how was it? You just
Lee and I are still friends. I don't think he wanted me to leave, but frankly, for me, my mother had contracted cancer, and I wasn't able to spend a lot of time with her. And it sort of was a life moment that I said that I wanted to work for myself. So, I mean, I took, frankly, a pretty big risk and left a fairly comfortable situation to start my own practice.
You mentioned Lee Steinberg. To me, he was the prototypical, first guy in there as the agent in the mid-'70s, taking Steve Bartkowski and hitting the top of the game. And then he had some personal problems and really kind of almost hit rock bottom. But now he's back on the rise again. I mean, you talk about a guy who's reinvented himself.
The way I describe Lee is Lee reminds me of the robot in Terminator 1. And I'm not saying that like the evil part.
He's resilient.
He's resilient and relentless, and until you catch him in the printing press where you press the button.
You wonder too. It's like I know this show is not about Lee, but you just kind of wonder how does he make his comeback where he has to kind of he picks himself up, and then he's got to start cultivating the relationships again. He still has the money.
But you think about it, his experience. I got a thing on LinkedIn from him the other day. He's updated his profile. He's just, all the years of experience. It's like you, Steve. I mean, you've had a lot of experience. I think this guy, he's going back another 10 years, 12 years, more than you even. So that's a lot of clients.
The thing to remember is, again, frankly, the essence of being successful as a sports agent is having good clients. So if your brand is such that someone feels comfortable with you, if Andrew Luck tomorrow decided that he wanted Lee Steinberg to represent him, Lee Steinberg would suddenly be one of the most influential agents in football again. That is very much how it works. And again, it's a combination of those skills and those relationships.
Yeah, it's interesting too because the contracts that are coming out now compared to what they were 30 years ago. 30 years ago, the guy couldn't maybe get a contract that was like one shot and then he could.
No, I think Lee's office had 20 years ago. I think Lee's office had the first round pick 7 years in a row. Now you could buy Thailand with that.
Yeah. Hey, switching topics a second, I got to ask Steve. You mentioned Cornell University, and my immediate reaction to that is I had a good friend who was a physics professor there, but more importantly, I had a relationship, a good friendship, more like a casual friendship, with a guy who came out of Cornell and is very well known, and he gave me my first. Unwittingly, gave me a huge break and got me into New York, and that was Keith Olbermann. I actually replaced him in a little network where he first started. And I'm wondering if you've ever had any dealings with him. You could talk about a fascinating guy who's kind of hard to read.
Well, it's actually interesting. First of all, let me preface. I love Keith Overman.
I do too.
Most people I know can't stand him. I think he's brilliant. I tape record his show every day. I remember once when he was an anchor in L.A. and he had offended people, and he came on and said, "I want to apologize to the people I've offended." And he started reading the A's in the phone book. So he's hilarious. Now, my only contact with Keith Overman, though, is he was sitting at a bar during the Super Bowl in San Diego one year, and I walked up, and he was sitting with a woman that I thought was a reporter that I knew, and I went over to say hi, and it turned out not to be her. And the look I got from Keith Overman was probably similar to the looks he gave to the people
Like, when
he left Gore's news station.
I got to tell you a little story about him. Interesting story. He cannot drive a car, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here, but the reason is Keith's a tall guy. He was running to the subway once, and this is about 1981, and he hit his head on the roof there as he was walking or running into the subway, and he suffered some kind of weird, it wasn't just a concussion, it was something that knocked his balance out or his depth perception out, so he can't tell exactly how far a car is in front of him, so he cannot drive a car. Yeah, it's an interesting story. Yeah.
Wow.
So maybe that's why he's so irascible. You know?
He is. I do really enjoy him.
Yeah. Well, he's so quick.
Yeah, he's very quick. And Cornell has given us Keith Overman, Carl Sagan, and Bill Maher.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
You mentioned these people who are just driving me freaking crazy.
Is Carl Sagan?
Oh my God! Don't get me started on that.
Carl Sagan is no longer with us, so you know.
Okay, George Seifert was a coach there. How's that?
Yeah, I like George Seifert's a good guy. I like George Seifert. He always used to talk about getting out to Western Marin and going out to this little restaurant called Vladimir's after he'd been out on the boat fishing for 3 or 4 hours.
I'll tell you a Cornell grad of significance. I remember once Ed Marinaro, the Heisman Trophy winner, runner-up, was once there, and he came back for a talk when I was at the law school, and a girl with a dog sitting on her lap raises her hand to Marinaro, asks her for a question, and she asks him, "How's your love life?" And his response was, "I see better than yours."
Oh.
Referring to the dog.
Oh.
That's my Ed Marinaro memory.
For people who don't remember, he was on which TV show was that?
Hill Street Blues.
Yeah.
And great. And Penn State, right? Originally, or is it? I thought he went to Penn State.
He went to Cornell.
He definitely
went to Cornell.
And he was a runner-up.
He was runner-up to Pat Sullivan.
Okay, and did he play for the Vikings? Was it?
I believe he played for the Vikings and he played for the Jets.
And he was actually a decent player too.
I could have sworn he went to Penn State, but I guess I'm wrong. Oh well.
Huh.
Somewhere back east.
I think you're thinking of John Cappelletti.
That's who I'm thinking of. Yes, another Italian.
There
you go. They all sound alike to me.
They all sound alike. All right.
All right.
So let's see. What else have we got here? Anything else you guys want to cover specifically? Oh, well, wait, Deflate Gate. You said even though it's a few weeks old, there was something you wanted to mention about Deflate Gate.
I find the whole Deflate Gate story fascinating because in one sense I do believe that if Brady knew what was going on, the wrath of the league should come down on him. I question whether they can prove it, but it's also interesting because you look at sports that historically, where is the fine line of where it's cheating and where it's trying to gain an advantage? Bobby Thompson hits the shot hit around the world with signs that were allegedly stolen through the scoreboard where the Giants read the Dodger signs.
Yeah, but so what? A fastball inside.
You still got to hit it though.
And Tom Brady still has to throw the touchdown.
That's
What
right.
I'm saying is there's a slippery slope. Gaylord Perry's in the Hall of Fame with a spitball.
Yeah. Before that, he was not a good pitcher.
That's true.
Bill Belichick getting fined for the video, but if he had hired Dustin Hoffman from Rain Man to just memorize all the moves it's certainly not illegal to try to steal a team's signs during a game. I find it very interesting because in one sense you're always trying to gain an advantage. I mean, obviously what Lance Armstrong did was wrong. And on the other side, stealing a sign, I guess, is acceptable.
I don't have a problem with the guy. You have a guy on second base, and he's looking and he's trying to tell his at bat.
You're trying to get a revenge.
But there's and on that, but again, it's interesting to me that there's a slippery slope.
Well, I was going to say Joe Montana checked in on this the other day. He said he didn't think it was that big a deal. And he said, if I was in that situation, I'm not sure if I would have done the same thing that Tom Brady did.
Yeah.
I was very competitive. He didn't like the fact that on a cold day, if the ball was overinflated, he couldn't get a good grip on it.
Yeah, I mean, that is pretty important. I mean, I think that it definitely is an advantage. The funny thing is I think the Patriots are going to save money, aren't they? Because because they don't have to pay Brady, even if they paid $1 million fine.
I think it doesn't matter. I think they'd rather not save that money.
True, but I mean, it's kind of interesting.
Well, I mean, based on that, they're also saving money that they're not going to have to pay the 2 first-round draft choices they lost. So, I mean, I would say that kind of savings is probably not what they aspire to.
Here's your strategy: keep losing every year. Try to be the worst team and keep getting the first-round draft pick, and then suddenly one year you get them all in one.
Doesn't work that way.
No, I mean, as we were talking off the air, I mean, I find it interesting that you contrast the Warriors, who got great without the first pick in the draft. You contrast it to the Colts becoming a team that's a Super Bowl contender every year because they had the good fortune to be terrible in the 2 years that millennial players in Luck and Manning.
I like Andrew Luck. He's definitely big and strong.
I think if there was a draft in the NFL today of players, there's no question Andrew Luck would be the first player.
God, he was fun to watch in college. I got to cover his career, and he was like a man among boys.
Yeah.
I remember one time he took off on a run against Cal in the big game, and he just bowled his way over 2 or 3 guys, and made a couple of nice moves. I mean, it was just amazing to watch.
What I've heard about
Nagurski.
I've heard so much good about him, partly because I represent many players from Stanford, and it's amazing how much he stays in touch with the other players.
Well, his dad was a great guy too. Oliver Luck was a fine.
My understanding is he's represented by his uncle, and I mean he is what's good about sports.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
All right, guys, we're going to cut to our third and final commercial break, and we're talking baseball incidences they'd rather forget. Tommy John was not only a great pitcher for an incredible 26 years, but is also so well known, obviously, for Tommy John surgery. Let's see here. I'm sure he's glad that is what he's remembered for instead of what happened on July 27, 1988. What happened? It's kind of tough. This one's a tough one because you just have to kind of know what did Tommy John do in July of 1988 that he'll be remembered for. Tough question.
Tough question.
Yeah, every once in a while I got to give you some tough ones.
All right.
All right, stay with us. You're listening to Sports Econ 101. We'll be back with some closing comments.
I think
Got
that's
blown
right.
off the mound.
That was good. That was good.
2 grand slams? No, actually it was Stu Miller, but he
Stu
didn't
Miller.
get literally blown off. He was just moved
Lost
just a little
some
bit.
balance.
Yeah. Stu Miller was only about 170 pounds, and the wind was howling, and he just moved him just slightly. And the umpire said, "Oh, you started your motion, balk." So from that point on, and he just passed away last year.
When does this air?
This will air this Saturday at noon. And if you go to iHeartRadio and go to Sports Byline USA.
Yeah, you can listen to all the programs that are archived. It's kind of neat.
Yeah.
I was checking out the other one. Yeah.
So is this done like through a deal with you and Ron?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
It's nice. Edward gives me trade dollars, and I'm taking my wife and daughter up to Healdsburg for 2 days and Calistoga for 2 days back to back. 2 real nice little hotels.
That's great.
Only went down to Half Moon Bay last week, which was fun. So the girls liked it. They enjoyed it. Yeah.
That's the important thing.
Yeah.
There's a girl, happy wife, happy life.
Boy, tell me about it.
All right, here we go. Welcome back to Sports Econ 101. Last time for today, I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with Bruce McGowan, my famous co-host, and Steve Baker, famous sports agent. When we cut to the third commercial break, we asked this trivia question about incidences they'd rather forget. This one's kind of hard. Tommy John, what's his favorite color? No. Tommy John was not only a great pitcher for an incredible 26 years, but is also remembered, he's known for the tendon transplant surgery that the operation now bears his name, Tommy John surgery. I'm sure he's glad that he's remembered for that instead of what happened on July 27, 1988. Anyone know what happened?
Well, that was late in his career. I think probably 2 grand slams in an inning.
No, that definitely would have been instant to forget. No, he made 3 errors on one play. First thing that happened was he bobbled it when it got hit back to him. Then he threw it past first base, trying to get the runner, and then he threw wildly past the catcher.
Right. How did he get the ball? He got the ball back to first baseman, threw the ball on a cutoff play.
In fact, there was a guy named Mike Grady. I remember hearing the story. In 1899, he made 4 errors on one batted ball. He was a third baseman. Ball gets hit to him. He bobbles it. Error number 1. Throws wildly to first base. Error number 2. Runner round second, comes to third. Perfect throw to him. he bobbles it, doesn't get. Doesn't
Sounds
get
like a
back
little
there.
league play.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The runner ends, the batter ends
Oh,
up
my
running
gosh.
home, and he makes a terrible throw.
Tommy John, though, I will say this, one of the nicest people. I got to cover the Yankees in '81, and a sad story. His son almost died. He fell out of a little boy, 6 years old, 5 years old, fell down a fire escape or something, and was in a coma for a while. This was right in the middle of the season. Luckily recovered. He had some after effects, nothing serious, but I remember that was just a very, very sad time for him. He was like 37, 38 at the time, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, for a child like that.
I mean, Tommy John was. His son was about 5 or 6.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, here's our thoughts for the day. First of all, thank you, Steve, for joining us again.
Thank you for having me.
Life is not about waiting for the storms to pass. It's about learning how to dance in the rain. I like that one.
Sounds like Gene Kelly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he probably said that.
Yeah.
Pain is nothing compared to what it feels like to quit. That's a good one, too. Okay, tune in next week to Sports Econ 101. We're going to be discussing sports topics from a business perspective, giving away more free vacations for answering sports trivia questions. Thanks for listening. On behalf of our team, I'm your host, Edward Brown. We'll see you next week.
Good,
So long.
good night. All right. Good deal. All right.
I saw in the back, it's